Did you ever wonder what New York was like B.C., that is before computers? Well, a new exhibit takes a look back in time before the digital age. It's called Analog City, New York, B.C. It's now on display at the Museum of the City of New York, a great place. It's a collection of more than 100 iconic objects and photographs that were cutting edge in their day, from typewriters to rotary phones. It's an historic trip that shows us how life was lived and business conducted before devices took over our lives. And joining me now is Lily Tuttles, who curated the exhibit at the Museum of the City of New York. Thanks for being here, Lily. This looks like a lot of fun and right up my alley, and I know a lot of people's alleys. Many of these images are so iconic. What made them stand out to you?
Well, I think getting a sense of the labor and the human capacity, all of the work and material artifacts that were involved in maintaining the city, helping it grow and really thrive in the 20th century. There was just so much stuff, so much space, so many people that were required to run this analog city. And it was just a tremendous, tremendous time for New York City.
All right, let's talk about a few of the everyday objects. Why were they unique for their time?
Sure. I mean, we talk about things like card catalogs, which we often associate with libraries as, keeping track of these huge collections of books and materials. But actually, things as simple as index cards were used to keep track of all sorts of things in our city. The 20th century was a time when New York was growing rapidly, becoming more and more complicated and diverse. And record-keeping tools as simple as an index card were essential to maintaining order in the city.
Could you imagine an index card? Well, anyway, the exhibit is separated into 4 sections highlighting aspects of life before computers. Let's talk about the first category, finance. Wall Street operated very differently back in the day, right?
Very differently, yes. A lot of people, a lot of noise, a lot of paper down on the trading floor. Really just a constant hum of people and paper and trading and telephones ringing all the time. And one of the challenges that the stock exchange faced was that as trading volumes increased considerably over the 20th century, the system really struggled to keep up, to keep pace with the trading volumes. And as much as the technology, the telephones, the pneumatic tubes were able to keep up and the ticker tape was able to get information and stock prices out into the world, eventually it was actually the computer that was able to modernize the trading floor and the trading system and really make it much more efficient in time.
All right, let's talk about something close to my heart, the media and how reporters cover the news in analog times before TV. Hey, I remember, what we used to call rip and read. You'd run over to the AP wire, so it's not that long ago. But I imagine it must have been, we get a story, boom, digital, it's on our phone and that's it. Things were a little different, right?
Things were a little bit different, but I think it's remarkable to think about the technology and, again, the human force that was required and really available to bring New Yorkers news from all over the globe. I mean, think about all of the things that were happening in the 20th century all over the world. And New Yorkers got this news delivered in a newspaper multiple times a day. Publications like the New York Times really brought world news into New York City readers many different times a day. There were so many papers in New York, English language papers, a vast foreign language press. New York really was a newspaper city. And so while you maybe didn't get a push notification on your phone, newspapers were incredibly important to keeping New Yorkers up to date and, really in the know.
Yeah, explain to someone under 25 what extra means. It doesn't mean the TV show extra, extra. That means they had to print an extra edition. And I remember, hey, I delivered an afternoon newspaper when I was little, and that was pretty much, there was no Live at 5 back then. People were just getting their news when they got it on the newspaper. Hard to believe even, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But these newsrooms really had an ear to the ground. As you mentioned, the news wires, the teletype machines. We have a teletype machine on view in the exhibition. They were really bringing in news from all over the globe in real time. And these, both we look at the way the writers and the editors crafted the stories and then sent them over to the composing room. And they got the papers, laid out and ready for print every day, multiple times a day, and got papers into the newsstands and into the hands of readers.
Incredible. You can't believe it. And anyway, let's go to the library. Books are digital now. You can Google anything. What was it like to get info back then? I know there were things called encyclopedias for sure.
Encyclopedias card catalogs. We talk about the fact that the New York Public Library had this service called Ask a Librarian, which still exists to a certain extent. But basically, if you needed the answer to someone, whereas now we would use Google, we would use Wikipedia, basically, any piece of information, you can just ask Siri. What you would do back then is you could literally call up the library and say, how many feet in a mile, or who painted this painting that I seem to like, any kind of information you needed, you could just call up and get an answer. And so we have examples of some of the questions and answers that were doled out by the New York Public Library. Also, just the ability to maintain this vast collection of books that were circulating, and put into the hands of New York City readers. It was a lot of work, and it took a lot of people and a lot of space and a lot of time, but it was incredibly vital to the education of New Yorkers. My father actually worked for one of those information things. The Daily News had it at night. You can call it. And he said most of the answers were the same. How many feet in a mile? He said, but every once in a while, we'd have to go to an encyclopedia. Remember those, Britannica? Anyway, okay, the final category, architecture. Can anything be designed using a computer? Now that can be. But how about the buildings back then? How were they built? How were they drafted? They were built and drafted, using just incredibly skilled and precise tools for measuring, for, drawing and erasing. Architects and engineers used precise tools like slide rules to make sure that these buildings would, be at once beautiful and elegant and befitting this great 20th century metropolis, but also that they were safe and they were stable. And it's remarkable to think that buildings like the Empire State Building, the Woolworth Building, were all designed, drafted, and engineered, with basic tools and no digital devices. Absolutely unbelievable. Listen, I'm not making this up. This is one of my favorite places, the Museum of the City of New York. And it's not overwhelming. You can go in there and cover it quickly. You can get the topic and get it done. And if you love this stuff like I do, trust me. Lily Tuttle, the curator of the Museum of the City of New York, thank you so much for being with us. Analog City, New York, B.C. is on display until December 31st. If you'd like more information about the exhibit, go to our website, cbsnewyork.com.